All right, we're going to start with a little pop quiz. Get out a pencil, get out a piece of paper.
Oh my gosh.
It's like you guys have been out of school for a while. Come on, pencil, paper, here we go. All right, list as many CSU campuses as you can. 30 seconds, go. So, my name is Matt Clover. I teach at Cal State Stanislaus. We joined this presentation with Dr. Allison O'Dowd from Humboldt State University. And so we're trying something a little different this morning. We're going to be talking about, as we're reflecting back on 25 years of CABW and looking ahead, the next 25 years, we're going to be thinking a little bit about the role of higher education, public higher education in California, and how we can support growth and development of future freshwater science professionals. So we're starting with a little discussion of the Cal State University system. And I seriously wanted you to kind of test yourself. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about the Cal State University system. And one of those misunderstandings is just who is involved. What are the campuses involved in the Cal State University system? Pop quiz number 2. How many CSU campuses are there? I did hear 23. That's correct. Raise your hand if you knew the answer. 23. 23 CSU campuses are shown here. And so there's a lot of misunderstanding because CSU campuses are not consistent in their nomenclature. There's many campuses that are California State University at fill in the blank, and that's the most common naming system. But there's a number of campuses that just go by, for example, Humboldt State, San Francisco State, San Jose State. But these are all part of the California State University system. California State University system is the largest system of higher education in the United States. Almost 500,000 students. 500,000 students. Over 50,000 faculty and staff. And let's do a quick show of hands. Raise your hand if you're a Cal State alum at any level. Look at that. That is amazing. I would say almost, at least a third, almost half the room. And so I think that goes to show just the impact of the Cal State system. Half of all bachelor's degrees in California are in the Cal State system. So we're also going to be hearing about the University of California system, and I wanted to very broadly and probably inappropriately kind of distinguish between two systems. But this is my take. Some generalizations. And so in the CSU system, the Master Plan for Higher Education in California from 1960 kind of distinguished between the UC and CSU systems. And UC is and still is the system that grants doctoral degrees, PhD degrees. Like CSU has some educational doctoral degrees. But for the most part, CSU is focused on bachelor's degrees as well as master's and teaching credentials. It historically began as an institution focused on training teachers. CSU is much more regional and local in focus. Most students at CSU come from the surrounding area, within an hour of campus, so they tend to be commuters, tend to be older students, working students. It's more broadly accessible than the UC in terms of who is admitted. And I'd like to think that CSU has a very strong, almost singular laser focus on student success and affordability. Just some quick numbers. You can read this faster than I can say it. But the take-home point here is that while CSU has many more students, it's got a much smaller budget, much less emphasis on research. Cal State system, I think, is known as the People's University. And in that respect, really our goal is to meet students where they're at and and help them achieve their goals. And so we try to be, it's very important we be as broadly accessible to the entire state as possible. So I'm going to show you some demographic information in terms of just racial and ethnic diversity, which is just one aspect of diversity. But in many ways, the CSU students mirror a lot of the demographic patterns in California, as you can see here. We compare or contrast this with students at UC. It's a bit different. CSU, almost half of the students in CSU are Latino or Chicano. And that's a much smaller proportion in the University of California. We recently did a survey for the Society of Freshwater Science, looking at demographic information for this national organization. And the results are very striking. SFS is not diverse. SFS is a predominantly white organization. And even here in California, as we look around the room, we see this. And so I want to make the point that CSU is working with students who represent the demographics of California. And as part of our collective responsibility to think about how inclusive organizations like this are. And the CSU can play a very important role in broadening participation in organizations like this that are working on issues related to water that are fundamental to our state. Part of what we want to do today is talk a little bit about the role of CSU in furthering freshwater science activities in the state. And so there's a couple of very important ways that happens. The Aquatic Bioassessment Laboratory has two main offices, and one of them is at Chico State. And I think it's fair to say most of the taxonomic work for benthic macroinvertebrates happens in the Chico State campus. And so this is a very important partnership for bioassessment here in California. Algae bioassessment. Nearly all of the algae taxonomic work takes place at the Cal State University San Marcos campus. Bob Sheath is the PI there, and Rosalina Stenkeva is the primary scientist running that laboratory. And they're responsible for much of the advances in algae bioassessment in California. Very important partnership involving the CSU system. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my dear colleague, Dr. Allison O'Dowd, who's going to tell you a little bit more about CSU. Alice.
Thanks, Matt. So as you can see from this slide, this is just a small snapshot, a sample of some of the faculty working in the CSU system on freshwater science. And you can see quite a few campuses are represented, not all. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but we just wanted to give you an idea of some of the different types of expertise in freshwater science, and you can see it's quite a broad range across the different campuses. And some campuses are a little more represented than others, because maybe I was more familiar with those at Humboldt State, but just to give you a sense of an overview. One other point to make about freshwater science is that there aren't really freshwater science departments, as we know. So there's a very inherent interdisciplinary nature of freshwater science, and folks being housed in biology or environmental science, geology, environmental studies, things like that. So there's a really wide range of where people are housed and how that might work for them to build collaborations and research. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and Matt kind of alluded to this earlier, is that CSUs are primarily teaching institutions, and so it can be a challenge for faculty and researchers to develop and maintain their research program compared to, say, research-oriented universities. And this is also related to obtaining funding, particularly funding for long-term staff for things like postdocs and research techs. So we have to be pretty creative in terms of how we do our research, and a lot of that is through working with other agencies, with other universities, and also a really big focus on involving students in our research, because that's part of the mission of the CSU as well. So I'm just going to give you two examples of some freshwater research that's being done in CSUs. And the first that Matt mentioned at CSU San Marcos, because they are the hub for bioassessment for algae in the state, this also enables opportunities to do research related to algae, and you can see here a couple publications that have students that are circled as co-authors, so really excellent opportunities to involve students in the work of algal bioassessment and research. Also at the Humboldt State University River Institute, we're partnering with other universities like UC Davis, CSU Monterey Bay, and also SWRCB to look at an issue, a statewide issue on classifying streams with funding from the State Water Board. We also have projects where we're partnering with tribes in Northern California. We have a project on the Trinity River working with the Yurok tribe and Hoopa Valley tribe, and also CDF&W looking at macroinvertebrate drift on the Trinity and how that relates to dam releases. So there's other institutes across the CSU that are housed at different universities that have a water focus. Now granted, a lot of these are focused on things like water conservation, irrigation, but there's also avenues for pursuing freshwater ecology research as well. So it's another avenue that CSU faculty and researchers can do research and work together. There's also three what are called affinity groups that are across the CSU that I wanted to point out. There's one called the Water Resources and Policy Initiatives, or WRPI. They offer different funding opportunities. For example, they have funding with USDA to provide student internship opportunities. They have an annual meeting where folks present their research and also to build collaboration. So that's been something that's come about in the last decade or so. There's also CSU Coast, the Council on Ocean Affairs, Science and Technology, which by the name you can tell focus on coastal issues, both marine, nearshore, but also coastal watersheds. So this has been a nice avenue for CSU grad students and undergrads to obtain funding for their research. That's sort of a CSU-wide mechanism for promoting that. And then lastly, the Agricultural Research Institute, which you may at first glance think, how's that really transparently related to freshwater science? It's only 6 CSU campuses that are involved, but they have quite a bit of funding available. And as long as it's agriculturally related research, but that could include things like aquaculture and fisheries resources. Something that's emerged pretty recently related to the Society for Freshwater Science is a group of folks that call themselves the Primarily Undergraduate Institutions Group, or the PUI. And what this has sort of turned into is a forum for faculty and students to talk with each other about how to overcome some of those challenges of being in a primarily teaching institution, but also wanting to send our students to these conferences and to be involved in active researchers and training them as freshwater scientists. So what they've done over the past few years is they've done some surveys, and we have an email list where we can talk to each other about how to get our students and ourselves to different professional meetings, and they posted special sessions looking at how are we involving undergraduates in freshwater research. And at the 2019 meeting, they have a special session on scholarship of teaching and learning in freshwater science, and that's going to be in Salt Lake City. So just to wrap up, we wanted to kind of summarize some of the overall challenges and opportunities that we as faculty in the CSU often are faced with. And we originally set up this slide to be, let's have one column that's challenges and one that's opportunities, but as we started to talk about them more, we realized some of these challenges are also opportunities. It really depends on how you look at it. So although faculty have high teaching and service workloads, limited resources, this really sparks creativity in how you would go about doing your research. And so that focus on undergraduate teaching and research has really been, for me personally, a great way to involve a lot of undergraduates and graduate students in my research. And also, as Matt mentioned, pulling from this large, diverse student body is really an excellent opportunity to bring in students from underrepresented groups and to try and diversify our society and really promote training of freshwater professionals for the future. Well, some of the ideas that we have looking forward into the next 25 years of freshwater science is possibly setting up some kind of statewide network of campuses among CSUs and or UCs that maybe are doing monitoring at different sites regionally. That's sort of a coordinated effort. So that's something, one of the ideas that we had. So I want to close into saying that if you think back to the numbers, all the different faculty and students that are part of the California State University system, we really have this wide range of expertise and offer a really great capacity for solving problems and addressing research questions in freshwater science. Thank you.